When an elderly woman gave her home to a black homeless man, it shocked everyone. But what he found inside left him speechless. What led her to this bold decision? And what secret was hidden within the house? Stay tuned for a story that will surprise you at every turn. Also, please comment where you are listening from, and if you enjoy this story, please subscribe for more narratives. Let's begin. Eleanor Thompson had lived in her quaint, weathered cabin, nestled in the rural Texas countryside for as long as she could remember. Built with her own two hands alongside her beloved husband Robert over 50 years ago, the cabin was more than just a house. Every creak in the floor, every worn piece of furniture told the story of their life together, years filled with joy, heartache, and love. Now, at 84, Eleanor spent her days quietly, her once strong and nimble hands now frail, though her spirit remained unwavering. From the small front porch, she would often sit in the evenings, staring out at the expanse of land that she and Robert had cultivated together. It was on this land that they had built their dreams. But those days were behind her, and so was Robert, now just a memory, gone but never forgotten. The cabin held everything she cherished, and in her heart, she believed it would be her final resting place. But as the years rolled on, her children, Thomas and Lydia, grew more concerned with each passing month. Calls had increased in frequency, daily check-ins that had once been loving and caring, now turning more insistent, bordering on demands. "Mom, it's time," Thomas would say, his voice firm. "You can't keep living out there by yourself. What if something happens to you?" "I'm fine, Thomas," Eleanor would reply, her voice soft yet resolute. "I've taken care of myself for years. This is my home." But no matter how hard Eleanor tried to reassure them, their insistence grew louder, more persistent. They painted pictures of cozy nursing homes with friendly staff, daily activities, and professional care. They tried to convince her that moving would mean less worry for everyone involved, including herself. The guilt they imposed weighed heavily on her, but Eleanor clung to her cabin with fierce determination. "I'm not ready," she would whisper to herself when the conversations ended, her hands trembling slightly as she sat alone at the kitchen table. The same table where she and Robert had shared countless meals, where they had dreamed together about the future that never included leaving this place. It wasn't that Eleanor feared the idea of getting old or needing care. It was the thought of leaving this cabin, her sanctuary, her life's work, that broke her heart. The cabin had become part of her, and every corner was a reminder of the love she once shared with her husband. The oak tree just outside the window, where they once carved their initials. The garden that had once bloomed with flowers she and Robert planted together, now overtaken by wild Texas brush. But her children didn't understand this attachment. To them, it was just a property, old and run down, not worth keeping. They saw it as a burden, something that should be sold or renovated, a way to make a profit or secure a future for the family. The sentimental value it held for Eleanor seemed lost on them. One cold afternoon, as Eleanor sat by the fire, the phone rang once again. She knew it was Thomas before she even answered. His voice was gentle at first, but firm, as he began the now familiar speech about her needing proper care. "You've had a long life, Mom, but it's time to think about yourself," he said, as if she hadn't been thinking about herself all along. After minutes of back and forth, Eleanor's heart grew heavy. She was tired of fighting, tired of defending her decision to stay. Her body ached more these days, and deep down she knew she couldn't keep up with the cabin forever. "I'll go," she said finally, her voice quivering with defeat. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. "I'll move to the nursing home." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Her son, surprised by her sudden change of heart, asked, "Are you sure, Mom?" "Yes," she replied softly. "But there's something I need to make clear." Eleanor took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "The cabin stays with Oliver." Silence. Then came Thomas's confused voice. "What do you mean, Oliver? The homeless man?" "Yes, Oliver," Eleanor said firmly, her voice gaining strength as she continued. "He's been a good man to me. He's helped me more than anyone. I want the cabin to go to him when I'm gone." "But Mom," Thomas interjected, his voice tinged with irritation. "He's just a drifter. You don't know him like we do. He can't take care of a place like this. Besides, we can sell the property, make something useful out of it." Eleanor's heart sank at her son's words. It was as though they didn't see the kindness in Oliver, the man who had always been there for her when no one else was. The man who, despite having so little, never asked for anything in return. She thought of the many times Oliver had appeared at her door with a smile, fixing a broken fence or carrying her groceries, refusing any kind of payment. Eleanor had known Oliver's story, a man broken by loss, but still with a heart full of goodness. He had become more than a helper. He was her friend, the one person who never judged her, never questioned her decisions. Thomas and Lydia wouldn't understand. To them, Oliver was nothing but a homeless man. But to Eleanor, he was the only one who truly cared for her without expecting anything in return. Her children pushed back, scoffing at the idea. They tried to convince her that it was absurd to leave the cabin to a man with no stable life, no future. But Eleanor remained resolute. "I've made up my mind," she said quietly, her voice calm but firm. "The cabin is for Oliver." What her children didn't know was that Eleanor had something much more valuable in store for Oliver than just the cabin. A secret she had kept close to her heart, something hidden that would change Oliver's life forever. It wasn't just about the property. It was about leaving behind a legacy of kindness, a final act of gratitude for the man who had been there for her when she needed it the most. Little did her children know that this would set off a chain of events that would alter all of their lives in ways they never could have imagined. It was a sweltering summer afternoon in the small town of Cedar Grove, Texas. Eleanor, now well into her 80s, had just finished her weekly trip to the local market. Her body, once strong and nimble, now struggled with even the simplest of tasks. She moved carefully, her arthritic hands gripping the heavy bags of groceries as she made her way down the dusty road towards her cabin. The sun bore down on her relentlessly, and just as she reached the corner of Main Street, one of her bags tore open with a soft ripping sound. Eleanor gasped as apples, oranges, and a carton of eggs rolled away from her, scattering in all directions. For a moment, she stood there, frozen in embarrassment, watching helplessly as her groceries escaped her grasp. People walked past without much more than a glance. It wasn't that they didn't care, but in the bustle of the town, it was easy to ignore an old woman struggling by herself. That was when he appeared, almost as if from nowhere. Oliver, a man whose rough, weathered appearance would have likely made others keep their distance, stepped forward without a word. His clothes were faded, and his shoes looked like they had seen far better days, but there was something in his expression that softened his otherwise rugged exterior. He moved quickly, bending down to gather the scattered fruit with an efficiency that suggested he had done this many times before. "Here, ma'am," he said in a low, gentle voice as he handed the rescued apples back to Eleanor. "You dropped these." Eleanor looked at him, startled by the kindness in his eyes. "Oh, thank you so much," she stammered, her voice tinged with relief. Without waiting for a response, Oliver headed into a nearby corner store, reappearing moments later with a new bag in hand. "This should do the trick," he said, carefully placing the groceries into the fresh bag. Then, with an unexpected ease, he took the rest of Eleanor's bags from her hands. "Let me carry these for you." Eleanor hesitated. She wasn't used to strangers offering help, but there was something sincere about him, something that reminded her of a time when people weren't afraid to offer a helping hand without expecting anything in return. Reluctantly, she nodded. "Well, thank you. It's just up the road." As they walked, Eleanor noticed that Oliver kept a respectful distance. He asked no personal questions and offered no stories of his own. He just carried her groceries, his worn shoes making soft crunching sounds against the dirt road. When they finally reached her cabin, Eleanor turned to thank him again, offering him a few bills from her wallet. Oliver smiled faintly, shaking his head. "I don't need anything, ma'am. I'm just glad to help." He placed the bags on her porch and tipped his old, faded hat before turning to leave. "At least come inside for a cup of coffee," Eleanor insisted, feeling awkward about sending him away empty-handed. "It's the least I can do." Oliver paused, and for a brief moment, his stoic expression softened into something like surprise. "Coffee would be nice," he said quietly. That cup of coffee became the first of many. After that fateful afternoon, Oliver began stopping by the cabin more frequently. It started with small things, helping Eleanor with her garden, fixing the wobbly porch steps, or carrying her groceries when he saw her in town. His presence became a comforting part of her routine. Despite Eleanor's many attempts to pay him for his efforts, Oliver refused every time. "You're a good woman, Mrs. Eleanor," he would say, a modest smile on his lips. "I don't need your money." The only thing he ever accepted was a slice of her famous homemade cake and a cup of coffee, which she made just the way he liked, strong and black, with a pinch of sugar. As the weeks passed, their unlikely friendship blossomed. Oliver, who had once kept to himself, found in Eleanor a rare companionship. They shared quiet afternoons on the porch, talking about everything from the weather to Eleanor's late husband, Robert. She spoke of the days when she and Robert had built the cabin with their bare hands, how they had started their life with nothing but love and determination. For Oliver, these moments with Eleanor were a lifeline. He had been homeless for years, drifting from one town to the next after losing his wife to illness a decade ago. The grief had swallowed him whole, leaving him without purpose. But something about Eleanor's steady presence, her unwavering kindness, began to pull him out of the darkness he had been living in. He didn't see her as just an old woman in need of help. To him, she was a reminder that there was still goodness in the world. She never judged him for his ragged appearance or asked probing questions about his past. She accepted him as he was, offering nothing more than friendship and a warm place to sit for a while. And that, to Oliver, meant more than he could ever express. Their friendship was simple, but it was profound. For Eleanor, having Oliver around eased the loneliness that had settled in after Robert's passing. She found joy in the small moments, watching Oliver fix a broken fence, listening to him hum a tune while tending to the garden, or sharing quiet conversations over coffee. He never asked for much, but he gave so much in return: his time, his patience, his quiet strength. And in return, Eleanor gave him something he hadn't felt in years: dignity. She never treated him like a charity case, never made him feel lesser for his circumstances. In her eyes, Oliver was a good man who had fallen on hard times. She saw his heart, not his worn-out clothes or unshaven face. Over time, Oliver began to change. He started to take better care of himself, shaving more regularly, and even finding a cleaner set of clothes. Though he still had no home of his own, the cabin felt like a place where he belonged, if only for a few hours each day. As the months turned into years, their bond deepened. They became each other's quiet strength, two people, both lonely in their own way, finding solace in the company of the other. And though neither of them said it out loud, they both knew their friendship was special. Eleanor's children, caught up in their own lives, could never understand what Oliver meant to her, nor could they see the light she brought back into his life. But for Eleanor, that didn't matter. She knew, deep in her heart, that Oliver was more than just a passerby. He was the one person who had stood by her side, never asking for anything in return. And in her final years, that was enough. Little did Oliver know, his acts of kindness and loyalty would one day lead to an unexpected twist of fate, one that would change his life forever. For weeks, Eleanor had resisted the inevitable, clinging to the life she had known for so long. Each time her children brought up the nursing home, she found herself making excuses, small ones at first. "I'm still able to tend the garden," she'd say. Or, "The cabin isn't that much work." But deep down, she knew the truth. Her once steady hands now trembled as she gripped her favorite teacup. The stairs creaked louder with every passing day, and her walks to town had become shorter, the weight of age pressing down on her more than ever. Her children, Thomas and Lydia, were relentless, their concern growing sharper as the months passed. They weren't heartless, they simply didn't understand. They saw their mother as vulnerable, living alone in a house that had long outlasted its prime. Each phone call came with more urgency, each visit with more pleading. And Eleanor, exhausted from the constant pressure, felt her strength fading, emotionally as well as physically. The day she dreaded finally arrived. Thomas and Lydia had made the arrangements without even consulting her. They had found a nice nursing home nearby with friendly staff and well-kept gardens. "You'll be comfortable, Mom," Lydia had said, her voice soft but firm. "It's for the best." Eleanor knew they meant well, but they didn't understand. The cabin wasn't just a house, it was a piece of her soul. It held the echoes of Robert's laughter, the warmth of countless winters spent by the fire, the quiet whispers of a life lived with love and purpose. But at 84, her body had betrayed her spirit. The aches and pains were constant reminders that she could no longer care for the cabin the way she once had. And so, with a heavy heart, Eleanor packed her belongings. It wasn't much, just a few pieces of clothing, a box of old photographs, and the quilt Robert had given her on their first anniversary. She wandered the cabin for hours that day, touching each piece of furniture as if to say goodbye. The wooden dining table where she and Robert had shared countless meals. The old rocking chair that still held the indent of his body, as if he had just been sitting there. Tears filled her eyes as she looked out the window at the oak tree where they had once carved their initials. It had grown tall and sturdy, a testament to the life they had built together. But now it was time to leave. The decision had been made for her, and there was no turning back. Eleanor knew she couldn't leave without saying goodbye to Oliver. In the 3 years since he had first helped her with her groceries, Oliver had become more than just a helping hand. He was her friend, her confidant, the one person who understood her attachment to the cabin. He had never judged her, never questioned her decisions, and most importantly, he had never pressured her to leave. She picked up the phone and dialed his number. It rang only once before she heard his familiar voice on the other end. "Hello, Mrs. Eleanor?" "Oliver," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm leaving." There was a pause. "Leaving? What do you mean?" "They're moving me into a nursing home," she explained, her heart aching as she said the words out loud. "It's all been arranged. I don't have a say anymore." Oliver was silent for a moment, and Eleanor could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. He had feared this day would come, but he had hoped it wouldn't be so soon. "I don't know what I'll do without you, Eleanor," he finally said, his voice trembling. "You're the only person who's ever treated me with kindness." Eleanor swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure. "Oliver, the cabin, it's yours now, everything inside too." Oliver was stunned. He had never expected such a gift. "Eleanor, I can't accept that," he stammered. "It's your home. You built it with your husband." Eleanor smiled weakly, though tears filled her eyes. "It's not just about the cabin," she said softly. "It's about you, Oliver. You've been a good friend to me, and I want you to have a place where you can feel at home. It's the least I can do." She squeezed his hand tightly, knowing this would be the last time they stood together on her porch. "But listen," she added, her voice growing more serious. "There's something special I need to tell you when you visit me. Don't wait too long." Oliver nodded, though his heart was heavy with sorrow. "I'll visit you soon," he promised. As they embraced, Oliver couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing, something permanent. The cabin, which had always been a symbol of their bond, now felt like a parting gift. And as he watched her slowly walk back inside to gather her last few belongings, he couldn't help but feel that the chapter of her life in this house was closing for good. 2 weeks passed, and during that time, the cabin stood eerily silent. No longer did Eleanor sit on the porch, waving to neighbors as they passed by. No longer did the smell of fresh baked bread waft through the open windows. Oliver, heartbroken, walked by the cabin every day, hoping for a glimpse of his friend, hoping she might change her mind and return. But the day finally came when the door was shut for good. Eleanor's children had arrived early, packing her belongings and moving her out before she could even say a proper goodbye to the place she had called home for so long. Oliver watched from a distance, powerless to intervene. It all happened so quickly. One moment, the cabin was alive with memories, and the next, it was just an empty shell. As he stood there watching the car drive away with Eleanor inside, Oliver's heart ached. He knew he would never see her in the cabin again. And though she had promised to leave it to him, the thought of her being gone forever left a hole in his chest. But Oliver wasn't one to give up easily. He had made a promise to her, and he intended to keep it. He would find her, visit her, and make sure she knew that her final wish would be fulfilled. No matter how far the nursing home was, no matter how long it took him, Oliver vowed to find his friend again. That night, Oliver couldn't sleep. His mind was racing, replaying their last conversation over and over again. What had Eleanor meant when she said there was something special she needed to tell him? Why had she asked him not to wait too long? Determined, he set out the next morning, walking the familiar path to town. He went to the local shelter, asking if they knew which nursing home Eleanor had been taken to. They didn't have any information, but Oliver wasn't discouraged. He made it his mission to find her, visiting every nursing home in the area, asking if they had admitted an 84-year-old woman named Eleanor Thompson. Days turned into weeks, but Oliver didn't give up. He walked for hours each day, hitchhiking when he could, asking questions and following every lead. He couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out, that Eleanor's message was urgent. And though his legs ached and his spirit was weary, Oliver kept going. He had made a promise to Eleanor, a promise to visit her, to learn her final secret. And Oliver was a man who never broke his promises. The days had stretched into what felt like endless miles for Oliver. His feet were sore, his clothes tattered from walking under the relentless Texas sun, but his determination never faltered. Nursing home after nursing home, door after door, he asked the same question: "Is there an Eleanor Thompson here?" Most of the time, the answer was no. With each rejection, a part of Oliver's hope chipped away. He feared the worst, but he couldn't stop. He had made a promise to Eleanor, and nothing could keep him from fulfilling it. It was late one evening, just as the sky was turning dusky pink, that he finally found her. Tired and thirsty, Oliver had walked the last mile to a quiet nursing home nestled on the outskirts of town. The building was small, unassuming, with a garden of roses out front, their petals wilted in the summer heat. He shuffled inside, his heart heavy with anticipation. "I'm looking for Eleanor Thompson," he said to the receptionist, barely masking the desperation in his voice. The woman behind the desk looked up, her eyes scanning a list in front of her. She paused for a moment before nodding. "She's here, room 22. Oliver felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was quickly followed by a surge of anxiety. What would he find when he saw her? Was she okay? Had he waited too long? The door to room 22 was slightly ajar, and as Oliver stepped inside, the first thing he noticed was the stillness. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. His breath caught in his throat as he saw Eleanor, lying in bed, her small, frail frame barely making a dent in the thin mattress. She looked so different now, pale, fragile, a shadow of the strong woman who had once stood tall on her porch, watching over her land. Her hair, once silver and vibrant, now lay thin and limp against the pillow. Her eyes were closed, and for a moment Oliver feared he had come too late. But then, as if sensing his presence, Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. "Oliver," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but her spirit still unmistakably strong. Her tired eyes lit up with a familiar warmth when she saw him standing at the door. Oliver's heart ached. He had prepared himself for this moment, but seeing her like this shattered him in ways he hadn't expected. He approached the bed slowly, sinking into the chair beside her. "Eleanor," he said softly, taking her hand in his, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "I've been looking for you." Eleanor smiled weakly, her grip on his hand feeble but full of emotion. "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice rasping. She gestured for him to come closer, and Oliver leaned in, his ear close to her lips. "I don't have much time," she whispered, her voice soft but deliberate. "There's something I need to tell you, something important." Oliver's heart raced. He nodded, urging her to continue. "The cabin," Eleanor began, her words coming in slow, labored breaths. "It's yours now, just like I promised. But there's more." She paused, her gaze drifting toward the window, as if looking back on the life she was about to leave behind. "I've hidden something there, Oliver. Something only for you." Oliver's brow furrowed. "Something hidden?" he asked, his voice low, confused. Eleanor nodded, her eyes locking onto his. "In the kitchen, the high cabinet, it's yours, all of it," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. "Promise me you'll go there. Promise me you'll find it." Oliver shivered at her words, a sense of mystery and responsibility washing over him. "I promise, Eleanor," he said, his voice filled with both confusion and determination. Eleanor smiled softly, closing her eyes for a moment, as if a great weight had just been lifted from her. "Good," she whispered. "I trust you, Oliver, more than anyone else." There was a long pause, and Oliver could feel the clock ticking against them. He wanted to ask her more, to understand exactly what she meant, but time was slipping away from them both. Before Oliver could process what she had told him, a nurse stepped into the room. "I'm sorry," the nurse said gently. "Visiting hours are over." Oliver looked back at Eleanor, his heart heavy with sadness. "I'll come back soon," he promised, squeezing her hand one last time. Eleanor's eyes fluttered open once more, her smile faint but filled with warmth. "Thank you for everything." As Oliver turned to leave, he took one last look at his dear friend. She lay there, peaceful, as if a great burden had been lifted from her shoulders. For a brief moment, he imagined her back in the cabin, standing on the porch with the wind blowing through her hair, just as she had been the day they first met. What Oliver didn't know, as he walked out of the room, was that this would be the last time he would ever see Eleanor alive. She passed away quietly that night, her final wish entrusted to the one person she had believed in the most. The next morning, Oliver awoke to a heavy feeling in his chest. Something wasn't right. His heart pounded as he made his way back to the nursing home, only to be met with the devastating news. Eleanor had passed peacefully in her sleep. The words echoed in his mind, but it felt surreal. Gone? How could she be gone? His friend, the woman who had changed his life, was no longer here. He hadn't even had the chance to properly say goodbye. Oliver sat on a bench outside the nursing home, the sun warming his face as tears welled in his eyes. He wasn't one to cry, not after all he'd been through. But this was different. Eleanor had been the only person who had shown him unwavering kindness, and now she was gone. But as the grief settled in, so did something else. Her final words. The cabin, the hidden secret. She had left something behind for him, something that could change everything. Oliver wiped the tears from his eyes, steeling himself for what was to come. He had made a promise to Eleanor, and he intended to keep it. He would return to the cabin, find what she had left for him, and honor her memory. With a heavy heart and a determined mind, Oliver made his way back to the cabin. It no longer felt like just a house. It was now a place filled with mystery, a place where Eleanor's final wish remained hidden, waiting to be uncovered. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever Eleanor had left behind, it was meant for him. And now, he would discover what it was. The morning sun filtered through the trees as Oliver made his way back to the nursing home. He carried a simple bouquet of wildflowers he had picked along the way, their bright colors a sharp contrast to the dull ache in his chest. He had hoped the flowers would bring a smile to Eleanor's face, a small token of his gratitude for the friendship they had shared. But as he approached the front desk, the look on the receptionist's face told him everything before she even spoke. "I'm so sorry," the nurse said softly, her voice gentle but firm. "Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep last night." The words hit Oliver like a punch to the gut, knocking the air from his lungs. He stood there, frozen in disbelief, his fingers tightening around the stems of the flowers until they bent under the pressure. He had known this moment would come, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of it. Eleanor, his friend, his confidant, was gone. Just like that. "Would you like to sit down?" the nurse asked, concern in her eyes. But Oliver shook his head, mumbling something unintelligible before turning and walking out of the nursing home. His feet moved on autopilot, carrying him back to the one place that still felt connected to her, the cabin. As Oliver approached the cabin, it felt different, lonelier, quieter, as if the life had been drained from it along with Eleanor's passing. He stood at the gate for a long moment, just staring at the house. This was the place where their friendship had blossomed, where he had spent hours laughing and talking with Eleanor over coffee. But now, without her, it felt hollow, like an abandoned relic of something once vibrant and alive. He fumbled for the key Eleanor had told him about, the one hidden under the third flower pot on the porch. His hands shook as he lifted the pot and found the old, worn key, just where she had said it would be. He paused before turning it in the lock, taking a deep breath. This was it, the moment Eleanor had entrusted to him. But what would he find inside without her there? With a soft click, the door swung open. Oliver stepped inside, the familiar smell of the cabin enveloping him. A mixture of old wood and the faint scent of lavender Eleanor used to keep around. Everything looked exactly the same, but the absence of her presence was palpable. The chair by the fireplace where she used to sit was empty. The quilt she had once wrapped around her shoulders folded neatly at the end of the couch. Oliver moved slowly through the house, his fingers brushing against the worn edges of the dining table, the old bookshelf, the small knickknacks that Eleanor had collected over the years. Each object was a reminder of their time together, but now they felt like ghosts of the past, echoes of memories that could never be revisited. Without thinking, Oliver made his way to the kitchen. The routine was almost automatic. He grabbed the coffee pot, filled it with water, and set it to brew. Eleanor had made him coffee countless times before, and somehow making it now felt like a way to keep her memory alive, even for just a few more minutes. As the rich aroma of the brewing coffee filled the room, Oliver stood by the counter, lost in thought. He had kept his promise to Eleanor, but what now? She was gone, and though she had left him the cabin, it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a reminder of what he had lost. When the coffee was ready, Oliver reached up to grab the tin of sugar from the high cabinet, just as he had done many times before. But this time, something was different. As he reached for the tin, his fingers brushed against a small, heavy box shoved toward the back of the shelf. The box toppled forward, hitting the counter with a heavy thud. Startled, Oliver stared at the box for a moment. It wasn't like anything Eleanor had ever mentioned, and the weight of it was unusual. Curious, he knelt down and carefully opened it, his breath catching in his throat as the contents were revealed. Inside the box were bundles of cash, neatly stacked and wrapped in crisp paper bands. Oliver blinked, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. There were at least 14 bundles, each one marked with $10,000, money he had only ever seen in movies or on television. In total, there was $500,000. For a long moment, Oliver just stared at the money, his hands trembling slightly as he gently touched the bundles. This was what Eleanor had meant. This was the secret she had hidden for him, tucked away in the quiet corners of the cabin. It wasn't just the cabin she had left behind. She had left him a fortune. His thoughts raced as he tried to piece together how this was even possible. Eleanor had never lived lavishly. Her cabin was modest, her clothes simple. She had always seemed like someone who got by with just enough. How could she have saved so much? And why had she kept it hidden? But then, as the reality of the situation settled in, so did the weight of what Eleanor had done. This wasn't just money, it was a lifeline. Eleanor had given him the chance to rebuild his life, to escape the hardships he had faced since his wife's death. She had left him more than just the cabin, she had left him a future. But even as the gravity of the inheritance sank in, Oliver couldn't shake the sadness that lingered beneath the surface. This money, this cabin, it was all tied to Eleanor, and she was gone. He couldn't help but feel the bittersweet nature of the gift she had given him. It was life-changing, yes, but it came at the cost of losing the one person who had shown him true kindness. Oliver sat down at the kitchen table, the stacks of money still laid out before him, and took a deep breath. He poured himself a cup of coffee, just like Eleanor used to, and sipped it slowly, his mind filled with thoughts of his friend. She had seen something in him that no one else had, and she had trusted him with the last piece of her legacy. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked around the cabin. This place, once filled with the warmth of Eleanor's presence, now belonged to him. But it didn't feel like his just yet, not without her here to share it. But as the minutes passed, a quiet resolve began to form in Oliver's heart. This was what Eleanor had wanted. She had left this for him because she believed in him, because she knew he deserved a second chance. And now it was up to him to honor that trust, to make the most of the life she had given him. Oliver stood up and began to gather the bundles of money, carefully placing them back in the box. He wasn't sure what he would do with it just yet, but he knew one thing: he would take care of this cabin. He would preserve it just as Eleanor had, not as a monument to his good fortune, but as a tribute to the woman who had changed his life. He looked around the room one last time, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was no longer just a cabin. It was a legacy, a reminder of a friendship that had transformed him in ways he never thought possible. And as he locked the door behind him and stepped out into the sunlight, Oliver knew that Eleanor's gift wasn't just about money or property. It was about trust, kindness, and the quiet belief that even the most unexpected people could change the world. It had only been a few days since Oliver had discovered Eleanor's hidden fortune, but the weight of his newfound responsibility still sat heavily on his shoulders.